The first time I saw the towering wooden beams and glass walls glittering through the trees on the far side of my property, my stomach dropped. That wasn't supposed to be there. For 20 years, I had owned every acre of this land bought, fair and square, surveyed and marked with boundary stakes. It was my quiet refuge where I hunted, fished, and took my family to escape the noise of the city. But apparently, my neighbor had decided otherwise. Within months, he had constructed a full-scale luxury lodge complete with a hot tub, gated driveway, and even a neon sign that read, "Wilderness Escape Lodge." I found out the truth when I looked it up online. My neighbor, Rick, had been renting my land out on vacation sites for thousands of dollars a week. And the cherry on top? The day I walked up to confront him, he called the cops and reported me for trespassing on my own property. The knock came early on a Saturday morning while I was drinking coffee on the porch of my old cabin. My wife peeked through the curtains. "Sheriff's Department," she whispered, eyes wide. 2 deputies stood outside. One of them rested his hand on his belt. "Sir," the taller deputy said, "we got a call that you were trespassing and harassing guests at the Wilderness Escape Lodge. Gonna have to ask for your ID." I nearly choked on my coffee. Trespassing? Harassing? Guests? "That's my land," I said, shoving my deed in his direction. "That lodge is illegally built on my property." "I didn't trespass," he did. The deputies exchanged looks. One muttered something about civil dispute and told me to take it to court. They left without even knocking on Rick's fancy new front door. That was when I realized, if I didn't fight back, this man would keep stealing from me in broad daylight. Rick had moved in 3 years. Earlier, buying the lot next to mine, was loud, cocky, and full of talk about big plans for developing the area. I ignored him, thinking he was just another dreamer who'd get bored and leave. But Rick wasn't just dreaming, he was scheming, instead of building on his own lot. He hired contractors who bulldozed across the boundary line. I hadn't noticed right away since the far edge of my property is dense with trees. He must have thought I'd never catch on, but once the building was complete, he started advertising it as a private wilderness retreat, charging $500 a night. Guests came and went every weekend, treating the land like their personal playground. Rick had money rolling in. Meanwhile, my woods were trashed with beer bottles, tire ruts, and campfires dangerously close to my trees. He wasn't just trespassing, he was profiting off my land. The breaking point came one evening when I went to check on my fishing spot by the creek. A group of strangers were sitting around a campfire, roasting marshmallows. "Hey," one of them called, "Are you the caretaker? Can we get more firewood?" I clenched my fists. "Caretaker, no. This is my land." "Who rented this place to you?" Through Rick," the man said cautiously. "Is there a problem?" Rick himself strutted out from the lodge deck, beer in hand. "Problem," he sneered. "Yeah, there's a problem. This guy thinks he owns the place." He pulled out his phone right in front of me. "Sheriff, I've got a trespasser here again. He's harassing my paying guests." The deputies arrived within minutes. They didn't arrest me, but they warned me not to escalate. My own land, and I was being painted as the troublemaker. That night, my wife sat me down at the kitchen table. "Enough is enough," she said. "If he wants war, give him one. But do it smart." Napped. And that's when I hatched my plan. First, I dug out my DAD, the plat maps, and the original survey documents. They clearly showed my property extending past the creek straight through the ground where Rick's lodge stood. But documents alone weren't enough. I needed undeniable proof. I hired a licensed surveyor. Together, we walked the property line with GPS equipment. Bright orange stakes were driven into the ground, slicing right through Rick's shiny new driveway. The surveyor signed and notarized the official report. The lodge was sitting a full 60 feet inside my property line. Next, I hired a private investigator. He booked a stay at Rick's lodge, documenting every transaction. Photos, receipts, even footage of Rick bragging about how much money he was making. Best investment I ever stole. He chuckled on tape. By the time I was done, I had a binder. 3 inches thick. I marched into a lawyer's office downtown and slapped the binder on his desk. His eyebrows shot up. you're telling me, he said slowly. Your neighbor built a commercial lodge on your property, rents it out, and then calls the cops on you for being there. Exactly. He leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. This isn't just trespassing. This is fraud, theft, possibly racketeering. You've got a slam dunk case. We filed suit within the week. Trespass, unlawful enrichment, property damage, and fraud. But I didn't stop there. My lawyer advised me to file an injunction, immediately halting all rentals. By the next weekend, Rick's lodge was shut down his. Guests kicked out mid-stay, and oh, was he furious. Rick stormed onto my cabin porch, red-faced and shouting, "You think you can take me down? I've got friends in the county office. I'll bury you in legal fees." I calmly held up a copy of the injunction. You're done renting. Step off my land. For the first time, I saw fear flash across his face. He knew he'd been caught, but he wasn't finished yet. The courtroom was packed the day our case was heard. Rick strutted in wearing a flashy suit, acting like he owned the place. He brought glossy brochures of his lodge business, trying to paint himself as a hard-working entrepreneur. Then my lawyer stood and presented the evidence. The survey maps, the notarized reports, the investigators' hidden recordings, and finally, the kicker, a drone video showing the lodge sitting squarely in the middle of my property. The judge's face grew darker with each exhibit. When the recordings played of Rick bragging about stealing the land, the courtroom gasped. Rick's lawyer tried to argue mistaken boundaries, but the survey made it undeniable. The judge slammed her gavel. "Mr. Rick, you knowingly built a commercial property on land that does not belong to you. You profited from it. You harassed the rightful owner. Not only must the lodge be vacated and demolished at your expense, but you will pay damages in the amount of $750,000. I nearly collapsed in relief. Justice had finally landed. Word spread fast. Rick's Wilderness Escape Lodge was shut down overnight. Guests demanded refunds. The county revoked his business license, and within weeks, demolition crews rolled in, tearing down the gaudy structure piece by piece, leaving only rubble where my forest once stood. I watched from a distance, my arms crossed. My land was mine again. But the best part? The sheriff himself showed up at my cabin one evening, hat in hand. "Sir," he said, "I owe you an apology. We didn't take you seriously at first. Should have listened." I just nodded. "Next time, maybe don't assume the guy with the loudest voice is telling the truth." Rick eventually packed up and left town, drowning in debt from the lawsuit. Meanwhile, I planted new trees where the lodge once stood, restoring the forest to what it was meant to be. Sometimes the people who shout the loudest and throw their weight around the hardest are the ones hiding the biggest lies. Rick thought he could bully me off my own land, profit from my silence, and get away with it. But in the end, the law sided with the truth, and as I sit on my porch now, sipping coffee in peace, I look out at the land I fought to protect. I know one thing for certain: no one will ever steal it from me again. Asterisk, this story is just the beginning. There is so much more ahead. Subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey.